Breaking news. Brooke Hogan reveals she won't attend Hulk Hogan's funeral. Brooke Hogan drops a bombshell. She won't attend Hulk Hogan's funeral. Family drama unfolds as Brooke Hogan makes a shocking announcement amid tributes pouring in for her father, WWE legend Hulk Hogan. In this emotional and controversial update, we break down Brooke Hogan's surprising decision to skip Hulk Hogan's funeral. Why did she make this choice? What does this mean for the Hogan family legacy? Dive deep into the real story behind the headlines in this powerful exposé. Under a sky still dim with mourning, the world barely had time to absorb the loss of one of wrestling's most iconic figures, Hulk Hogan, when another emotional aftershock rippled through the public. Just as fans, celebrities, and colleagues gathered to share tributes and memories, Brooke Hogan, his daughter and once his closest ally, made a deeply personal and shocking announcement. She will not be attending her father's funeral. The statement, brief yet piercing, ignited a storm of speculation, grief, and confusion across social media, wrestling forums, and entertainment news outlets. It was more than just a family choice. It became a cultural moment, a painful fracture in the narrative that so many had built around the Hogan legacy. This was supposed to be a time of unity, remembrance, and reverence. Hulk Hogan, whose real name was Terry Bollea, wasn't just a wrestler, he was a household name. The mustache, the bandana, the voice, the charisma. He was the man who body-slammed giants and carried the WWF through the 1980s with unmatched energy. Millions grew up yelling, "What ya gonna do when Hulkamania runs wild on you?" And yet now, just days after his death from cardiac arrest, the most noticeable absence at his memorial will be his own daughter. Brooke Hogan's decision sent shockwaves across generations of wrestling fans and reopened wounds that many thought had long since healed. For those unfamiliar with their story, it might come as a surprise. Brooke was once the public face of Hulk Hogan's redemption, especially after the darkest moments of his career. From the early days of Hogan Knows Best, their father-daughter bond was showcased like a fairy tale, tight-knit, protective, inseparable. Hulk constantly reminded viewers that Brooke was his little angel, his pride and joy. But behind the staged reality TV smiles, there was a slow-burning tension that fame, money, and betrayal would eventually ignite. In many ways, their relationship was the casualty of both a broken family and a broken industry. Sources close to the family describe Brooke's decision as agonizing, not impulsive. According to one insider, who spoke under the condition of anonymity, Brooke had been silent for days after learning of her father's death, unreachable, withdrawn, and refusing to return phone calls from even her closest relatives. When she finally did respond, it wasn't with words of grief, it was a quiet confirmation. "I won't be going." That was all she said. No explanation. No justification. But the emotional weight behind those 5 words was deafening. Speculation immediately erupted. Was this a personal protest? A statement of unresolved pain? A final act of independence from a father whose image had long overshadowed her identity? One longtime friend of the Hogan family told WrestleZone that Brooke had carried years of emotional scars, some caused by her father's mistakes, others by the way the world held her accountable for them. She tried to stand by him for so long, the friend noted. But when it came to this, maybe she needed to finally let go. To understand the heartbreak and controversy behind this decision, one must rewind to the early 2000s, when the Hogan family, Terry, Linda, Nick, and Brooke, were everywhere. Their reality show Hogan Knows Best painted a picture of a perfect, if not quirky, wrestling family. But behind the production lights and scripted moments, real-life struggles were boiling. Brooke was being groomed for pop stardom while navigating her father's intense protectiveness. Terry, ever the overbearing father, micromanaged every aspect of her career, from music production to wardrobe choices. In many ways, Brooke wasn't allowed to grow up. She was expected to live in the shadow of Hulkamania, a shadow that grew heavier with time. Things took a darker turn when scandal began to engulf the family. Linda Hogan filed for divorce in 2007, citing years of emotional distance and suspected infidelity. Not long after, Nick Hogan was involved in a devastating car crash that left his friend, John Graziano, severely brain damaged. The Hogan name became synonymous with tragedy and dysfunction. And, through it all, Brooke tried to remain loyal to her father, often appearing in interviews to defend him or offering vague comments to defuse public outrage. But loyalty, as it turns out, has its limits. In 2015, everything changed. Hulk Hogan was caught on tape making racially charged comments that shattered his image and cost him major endorsements and a place in the WWE Hall of Fame, at least temporarily. Brooke was caught in the crossfire. Suddenly, the daughter who had once been known as a budding pop artist and television star became the spokesperson for damage control. "He's not a racist," she said in an emotional interview. "He just made a mistake." But not everyone was convinced, including, perhaps, Brooke herself. Insiders claim that after the scandal, Brooke began to withdraw from the wrestling world entirely. She distanced herself from WWE appearances, declined reality show reboot offers, and reportedly entered therapy. That scandal didn't just destroy Hulk Hogan's reputation, a close friend confided. It broke something in Brooke, too. She realized that all her years of defending him, sacrificing her own voice, had led nowhere. She lost a piece of herself. Years passed, and while public attention faded, private tension reportedly grew. Brooke moved to Nashville to pursue a quieter life, focusing on songwriting and away from the spotlight. Her relationship with her father became, at best, strained. They would speak occasionally, but never deeply. There were no reconciliations. No long apologies. Just silence, punctuated by the occasional public holiday post or polite birthday mention. It was a cold distance that neither seemed willing or able to bridge. So when news broke of Hulk Hogan's sudden death, many expected the family to come together in grief. But Brooke Hogan had other plans. Her absence will be more than symbolic. It will be a stark reminder of the unresolved pain between them. In a statement released to TMZ, Brooke's publicist simply said, "Brooke has chosen to grieve privately." She asks for understanding and space during this time. That may be the only official word we'll get from her, but the internet has been anything but silent. Some fans have rallied behind Brooke, applauding her bravery for refusing to perform grief she doesn't feel. Others have condemned the move as disrespectful, accusing her of abandoning her father at his final moment of remembrance. The divide has opened up a much larger conversation about public mourning, performative grief, and the pressure of being the child of a famous, controversial figure. Even WWE superstars, both past and present, have weighed in. Some on record, others anonymously. One former women's champion commented, "We all loved Hogan, but we don't know what happened behind closed doors." If Brooke needs to sit this one out, that's her right. Another wrestler, who shared a locker room with Hogan during his final years with WWE, said, "It's sad, man. I remember seeing them backstage together. He adored her. But sometimes the damage is already done." As funeral arrangements continue, fans are left wondering what the final ceremony will look like without one of Hogan's most visible family members. Brooke's brother, Nick, is expected to attend, along with Linda Hogan, despite their own rocky past with Terry. Wrestlers from across eras, John Cena, Ric Flair, Randy Orton, and even Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, are rumored to be among the attendees or to send personal messages. But the seat left empty by Brooke may be the one everyone will be staring at. The story is heartbreaking, not just because of the loss of Hulk Hogan, but because of what it reveals about the emotional debris left in the wake of fame. Brooke Hogan's decision may feel like a betrayal to some, but to others, it is the most honest choice she could make. In a world where public image is everything and mourning is often put on display for clicks and comments, choosing silence can be the most powerful scream. Still, questions linger. Will she issue a longer statement? Will she appear in private at the burial site at a later date? Has she spoken to her brother? Was there any final phone call between her and her father? At this point, the answers may not matter as much as the reality. Brooke Hogan, the daughter of Hulkamania, is grieving in her own way, and that grief doesn't follow anyone's script. In the coming days, attention will turn to the ceremony itself. The public tributes, the Ring 10-bell salute, and the speeches that will attempt to summarize a life too large for one arena. Hulk Hogan was a man of many faces, champion, icon, scandal, redemption, but the one title he seemed to hold closest was father. That makes Brooke's absence all the more painful, all the more symbolic. The daughter who once sang about her father being her hero now chooses not to stand by his casket. It's a decision that will echo far beyond the funeral home, rippling through the wrestling community and the millions who grew up believing in the power of Hulkamania, and yet, in a strange way, her choice also underscores something universal. That grief is not a performance. It is personal, messy, and often invisible. Brooke Hogan isn't boycotting her father's life. She's navigating the wreckage of it. And in doing so, she may be telling the most human story of all, the story of what happens when the legend dies, and only the scars remain. The next wave of headlines will undoubtedly focus on the pageantry of Hulk Hogan's final farewell. Cameras will capture tear-stained faces, floral arrangements shaped like championship belts, and perhaps even a WWE-style tribute video with slow-motion footage of body slams and victory poses. But no matter how grand or somber the spectacle becomes, one truth will loom larger than any eulogy. Brooke Hogan won't be there. And that absence will speak volumes, perhaps more than any speech or staged remembrance ever could. As fans gather, reporters line up outside the funeral venue, and chants of Hogan, Hogan, echo from those paying their last respects. Many will wonder if Brooke is somewhere nearby, watching from a car, hidden from view, torn between conflicting emotions. Or maybe she's miles away, walking through a quiet park, scrolling through old photos, or writing unsent messages to a father she never truly knew. The imagination runs wild because the silence she's kept invites endless interpretation. But maybe that's the point. Maybe Brooke Hogan doesn't owe the world a performance. Maybe what she owes to herself is something far deeper. Peace. There's something deeply tragic about the way fame warps relationships. Hulk Hogan, once a symbol of heroic strength, found himself in a world where his greatest battles weren't inside the ring but within his own home. Despite his charisma and achievements, he couldn't seem to pin down the one thing that truly mattered: family. And now, in death, that fractured bond is on full display. Some have questioned how such an iconic man could inspire such a public act of separation from his own daughter. Others see this as a bold reclaiming of identity by a woman who was overshadowed for far too long. For Brooke, growing up meant growing out of her father's shadow, which wasn't easy when that shadow was cast by a 300-pound cultural titan. Everything she did was scrutinized, every note she sang, every outfit she wore, every career decision she made. And through it all, she was never just Brooke. She was Hulk Hogan's daughter. That legacy was both a blessing and a burden. And now, in declining to attend his funeral, she's finally drawn a line in the sand. One she wasn't allowed to draw as a child. Those who know the Hogan family well say that beneath all the glitz, fame, and wrestling lore, theirs was a house of deep emotional walls. One former WWE executive who worked closely with the Hogans during their reality show years described it bluntly: the family always looked perfect on camera, but off camera, they were barely holding it together. It was like walking through a museum of unresolved emotions. That tension, long hidden behind smiles and catchphrases, now bleeds into public view through Brooke's silence. The public has responded in waves, some sympathetic, some cruel. In a society that often demands mourning to look a certain way, Brooke's refusal to perform it has triggered debates about duty, love, and loyalty. But those close to her insist that her choice wasn't about bitterness, it was about healing. Brooke isn't trying to hurt anyone, said a friend from her Nashville circle. She's just trying to protect herself. Losing a parent is hard. Losing one who never fully saw you? That's something else entirely. Interestingly, Brooke's decision has also resonated with many fans, especially those who've experienced estranged parental relationships. Comment sections on YouTube videos and Reddit threads discussing the situation have become confessional spaces, filled with people admitting that they too skipped funerals, refused to speak at services, or walked away from the idea of mourning someone who caused them pain. In this sense, Brooke's absence has become more than a tabloid headline. It's become a mirror. Meanwhile, others close to Hulk Hogan insist he tried, in his final years, to make things right. One longtime friend claims Hogan spoke often about his children, especially Brooke. He loved her more than anything, the friend recalled. He didn't always show it the right way. He could be hard-headed, proud, and too caught up in his own image. But he always said, "Brooke is my heart." If that was true, it makes her absence all the more painful. Was it too little too late? Did Brooke ever hear those words from his mouth, or only from those who claim to speak for him now that he's gone? In recent years, Brooke's own public appearances became rare, selective, and carefully managed. She seemed determined to leave behind the reality TV persona that once defined her. There were rumors of memoirs, unconfirmed reports of therapy retreats, and whispers of a secret podcast project where she would discuss her life anonymously under an alias. Nothing ever materialized publicly. But the point was clear: Brooke Hogan was stepping out of the ring, metaphorically, and away from the spectacle that had consumed so much of her youth. Still, some are holding out hope for a late reconciliation, even after death. Rumors have surfaced of a private, family-only ceremony that may occur weeks after the public funeral. Something quieter, less performative, where Brooke may show up in her own time. Whether or not that happens, only time will tell. But for now, the world will watch as Hulk Hogan is laid to rest, surrounded by colleagues, friends, and thousands of fans, but not the daughter who once called him her hero. There is undeniable poetry in the way life has mirrored the very drama Hulk Hogan helped create in the ring. His legacy was built on betrayal, redemption, dramatic returns, and shocking twists. And now, in his real-life final chapter, the script couldn't be more tragic. The ultimate face of professional wrestling exits the world stage amid family fractures, unfinished apologies, and questions that may never find answers. In truth, funerals are rarely just about the person who has passed, they're about the living. About those who must decide how to honor, how to forgive, or how to simply survive the grief. For Brooke Hogan, skipping the funeral doesn't necessarily mean she's denying her father's legacy. It may mean she's choosing to process it in a way that doesn't reopen every wound. It's a form of self-care that flies in the face of tradition, but perhaps tradition is the very thing she's trying to break free from. And so, as the final bell tolls for Hulk Hogan, the arena of public opinion roars with noise, speculation, and emotion. But somewhere, in a quiet corner of the world, Brooke Hogan grieves. Not in a church. Not at a podium. But in the stillness of her own chosen solitude. And in doing so, she reminds us that, even in the loudest storms, there is power in quiet rebellion. As the days pass and the tributes for Hulk Hogan grow louder, the questions surrounding Brooke Hogan's absence only deepen. Social media continues to dissect her decision, analyzing her old interviews, resurfacing clips from Hogan Knows Best, and even speculating about cryptic posts from her rarely used Instagram. What started as a quiet personal choice has evolved into a cultural firestorm, exposing the uncomfortable truth about how we expect public figures, especially the children of legends, to mourn on command. And yet, through all the noise, Brooke remains silent. No interviews. No comments. No appearances. Just absence, and that absence is echoing louder than any eulogy. One might assume the Hogan family, notorious for their history of internal tension, would respond with their own statement. But strangely, no one has publicly condemned Brooke's choice. Not Linda, not Nick, not even WWE. If anything, there seems to be a calculated silence around her decision, as if everyone involved understands this is no longer just about headlines or public perception. It's about grief. Real, messy, unstitchable grief. And no matter how iconic Hulk Hogan was, even he couldn't script how his daughter would say goodbye. There are some within the wrestling world who believe Brooke's choice reflects something bigger than a personal rift. According to one former WWE producer who worked on multiple Hogan-related projects, Brooke's absence might mark the end of the family brand. The Hogans were once America's wrestling royalty, he said. But over time, too many things broke them apart: scandals, divorce, lawsuits, broken promises. Brooke walking away from the funeral is like closing the book for good. In a world built on kayfabe, where the line between real and scripted is constantly blurred, this act felt undeniably real and painfully final. In contrast, the funeral itself played out with all the spectacle one might expect for a man like Hulk Hogan. The service was held at a private Florida chapel, closed to the public but live-streamed for fans across the globe. A custom white casket lined in red and yellow, adorned with the words "Immortal," sat beneath a massive floral display that spelled out "Hogan Forever." Video messages poured in from wrestling legends: Vince McMahon, Triple H, John Cena, and even Steve Austin, all sharing stories of Hogan's impact, his locker room presence, and his role in shaping modern wrestling. But even amidst all the pomp, it was clear there was a missing piece. When it came time for the family to speak, only Nick Hogan stepped forward. His speech was short, emotional, and oddly restrained. He thanked fans. He thanked his mother. He spoke of forgiveness. But not once did he mention Brooke. Not even a veiled reference. It was as if she had been quietly erased from the ceremony, her absence acknowledged only by the hollow space left behind. The WWE itself, ever careful in navigating public controversies, released a respectful tribute video, highlighting Hogan's biggest career moments, from his WrestleMania 3 body slam to his Hall of Fame induction. But again, no mention of the family. No appearances by Brooke. No references to Hogan Knows Best. It was as if the WWE too had chosen to honor only the character, not the man. And certainly not the fractured family that had come to define his final years. This erasure has not gone unnoticed. Fans have taken to Reddit and wrestling forums, noting the glaring inconsistencies in the way Hulk Hogan's legacy is being packaged posthumously. They're sanitizing everything, one user wrote. Where's Brooke? Where's the reality of what his life really became? For those who grew up watching the Hogan family implode on national television, the funeral felt like a carefully edited montage, highlighting only the highs and burying the lows. But Brooke's absence broke through that illusion. It reminded everyone that behind the kayfabe, behind the bandanas and flexing and entrance music, there was a deeply broken man, and a daughter who could no longer pretend otherwise, privately. There are rumors that Brooke did reach out to her father in his final days. A source close to the family claims she sent him a handwritten letter, one that has not been made public and may never be. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't closure. It was just truth, the source said. She told him everything she had held inside for years. Everything she couldn't say when the cameras were rolling. Whether Hogan read the letter or whether it ever reached him is unknown. But the very idea of it, the possibility that Brooke tried, in her own way, to confront the pain, adds a quiet depth to an already complex narrative. As the wrestling world moves forward, Brooke's decision will likely fade from headlines. Another scandal will erupt. Another legend will retire. Another return will steal the spotlight. But for those who truly watched this story unfold from the beginning, from the early days of reality TV to the chaotic collapse of the Hogan household, this moment will remain frozen. A daughter standing at the edge of legacy, choosing not to step forward. Choosing silence over spectacle. Distance over duty, and yet, perhaps the most poetic tribute to Hulk Hogan's legacy didn't happen at his funeral, but in Brooke's decision to skip it. In refusing to attend, she made the most honest statement of all, that love, when it is wounded, does not always perform. That grief does not always arrive in a black dress at the appointed hour. That sometimes, the loudest farewells are the ones never spoken aloud. It is in this quiet refusal that Brooke Hogan may finally reclaim her own name. Not just as the daughter of Hulk Hogan. Not as the girl on TV. But as a woman who has survived the weight of legacy, scandal, expectation, and loss. A woman who chose truth over optics. And a woman who, in her own way, said goodbye, not just to her father, but to the illusion of who he was supposed to be. As the final tributes fade and the wrestling world moves on, Brooke Hogan remains unseen, unheard, but undeniably present in the story. Not because she showed up, but because she didn't. And in that absence, she reminded us of something real. Something raw. Something that no amount of championship gold or roaring applause can ever replace. Grief, in the end, is not about who's watching. It's about what's real. And Brooke Hogan, in her quiet defiance, may have just given the world the most real moment of all. But even as the final bell tolled and the funeral ceremony came to a close, the emotional fallout was just beginning. Across podcasts, wrestling panels, and late-night talk shows, Brooke Hogan's decision became the center of gravity. Not Hulk Hogan's championship legacy, not his iconic WrestleMania moments, but the daughter who didn't come. And that alone tells you everything about the world we live in now, a world hungry not just for legacy, but for truth. The absence wasn't just physical. It was spiritual. It was symbolic. In a room filled with legends, celebrity friends, estranged family, and reverent fans, Brooke Hogan's empty seat became the invisible headline. It sat there like an unspoken confession. A reminder that no matter how invincible someone may appear in the spotlight, no one is untouchable in the eyes of their children. And the crowd may chant your name. The business may eulogize you. But if the people you loved most can't find a reason to show up, that's a different kind of loss entirely. Days after the funeral, footage surfaced of Brooke walking alone through a park in Tennessee. No entourage. No statement. Just a woman in a hoodie, sunglasses shielding her eyes from the paparazzi's flashes, headphones in, seemingly trying to escape the noise. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just kept walking. And in that solitary walk, there was something heartbreakingly honest. You could feel the weight of her decision in every step, but while she stayed silent, the world around her did not. Talk show hosts dissected her family dynamics like they were auditioning for therapy degrees. Former reality TV stars speculated on behind-the-scenes trauma. And YouTubers turned her absence into 10-minute monetized think pieces. Some even went as far as calling her selfish. But those closest to her knew better. This wasn't selfishness. This was survival. Behind closed doors, a few friends close to Brooke finally started speaking out. One former bandmate, who had performed with her during her early 2000s music career, shared a chilling memory. "We were at this hotel after a show, and someone asked her, 'What's it like having Hulk Hogan as your dad?' And she just laughed. But not the happy kind. The kind of laugh you let out when the truth is too heavy to carry. She said, 'It's like being followed by a crowd your whole life, cheering for someone who's never really seen you.' I never forgot that." Another childhood friend added even more context. "She always loved her dad. That was never the problem. The problem was that the world only let her love the character, not the flawed, wounded man behind it. Every time she tried to have a normal relationship, she got dragged back into the ring figuratively and literally. He was always the headline. She was always the footnote. And therein lies the heartbreak. Because as much as Brooke Hogan's absence felt like a protest, it may have simply been a long overdue boundary. A daughter choosing, at last, to mourn in a way that didn't require her to perform. She had already given the world her childhood, her loyalty, her voice. Now, she was keeping something for herself, her grief. But what happens after the funeral? What happens when the flowers wilt, the cameras turn off, and the chants fade into silence? That's when the real reckoning begins. In the days that followed, insiders claim that Nick Hogan attempted to reach out to his sister. According to an anonymous family source, the phone call went straight to voicemail. He left a message. He told her he missed her. That things didn't feel right without her there. That maybe their family was broken, but it wasn't beyond repair. Whether Brooke returned that call is still unknown. But what is known is this. The Hogan family story didn't end with Hulk's burial. It simply turned another page. Meanwhile, WWE, sensing the emotional undercurrent in the fan base, released a subtle update. On a quiet Tuesday evening, they uploaded a tribute video titled The Man, the Myth, the Father. It featured never-before-seen footage from backstage family moments, Hulk hugging Brooke after a WrestleMania, him nervously watching her rehearse in the studio, the two of them joking in a kitchen while Linda filmed. There were no voiceovers. No music. Just raw, candid footage. As if the company was trying, in its own way, to offer the world a more complete view of the man they'd lionized for decades. And more importantly, to acknowledge the emotional chasm that had been exposed. The video quickly went viral, racking up millions of views within hours. Fans flooded the comments with messages of support, not just for Hulk, but for Brooke. She deserves peace. Grief isn't a photo op. Brooke, wherever you are, take all the time you need. It was as if the world, after all its noise and judgment, finally paused and said, "We see you," and maybe that's the most powerful part of this entire story. Brooke Hogan didn't speak. She didn't defend herself. She didn't explain or justify. And yet, in doing nothing, she said everything. She reminded us that family legacies are complicated. That pain doesn't disappear with a